it's very interesting, like how much you're talking about the concept of sharing and working on things together existing for so long. And because, like, my personal career experience is that when you try to reintroduce the concept, maybe at especially large corporations, of this, we're working together with other companies, often competitors, on something that we all need and depend on, the idea just doesn't really fly that
I
well.
am going through that right now with a large group of industrial manufacturers. And culture is always important. We're talking about an industry with a very deep culture of building large industrial product, safety certification. So there's government regulatory action wrapped around this industry. If you're going to start building devices, that means we need a factory. In fact, building a factory, laying the bricks, pouring the concrete, that gets expensive very quickly. So, of course, everything is well specified, well architected, blueprints all over before you lay the first brick of the factory that'll eventually produce the thing. And so there's enormous capital expenditures up front and enormous regulatory pressure around. And now you step into this idea of software. And these folks have been using patents to protect their businesses for a very long time. And so there's a culture there, though, of, okay, so now we're going to collaborate. And we're going to collaborate as competitors in a culture of these huge capital expenditures all of the time, living in the world of bricks and mortar, living in the world of atoms instead of the digital world. And it's hard because they still bring that industrial manufacturing culture with them. And so there was a recent situation we were in. They described a couple of them. I've seen this from multiple of these high-end manufacturers now, describing this kind of software factory environment based on open source. And the hard thing is there's kind of this idea of, well, our suppliers who compete with one another will all go collaborate around the software that meets what we think are our requirements, but they'll be able to produce the safety certified product, software product that we'll buy as the primary manufacturers. And for our differentiation, well, we'll somehow make changes to these products because they're open source based and give that back to our suppliers to support. And I'm thinking, this is not a well-designed factory. Like none of the incentives exist, not technologically, not cooperatively and socially, not financially. There are no incentives that work in this factory. And when you approach it with, kind of their eyes and the way they've done things in their industry for, the past 100 years, it's like, w- well, we're collaborating on software. And instead, it's exactly that process of, I think the toughest myth, the biggest lie we've told ourselves in the last 35, 40 years of open source discussions is that somehow altruism has something to do with this. And it's not about the altruism in terms of we are all collaborating together for the greater good. It's actually more about generosity where, let's say, Ildiko, you and I, we come up with this great idea for a piece of software. You're already the better engineer, so you're going to do most of the creation. But we're in that space that we choose to share that we've got working software, we've got just enough engineering activity and practice around it so that it's buildable in the couple of places that we care, and we are willing, we think we're going to share this. Not because we're being particularly altruistic and we want to necessarily build a large community, but just because there's nothing here. We're not going to build a company around this thing. It's useful to you and I. We're done, but we'll happily put an OSI approved license on it and park it on a forge somewhere. If somebody gives us an interesting, contribution, great, but it's not like we're looking for them. And we've done that work, and that's now useful. A year from now, and one of us has to go back. Yeah, we can go back and pick it up from where we left off because we left it in a buildable state. Okay, we're doing open source. We have generously shared it outbound. There's a flow of IP outbound, but at no time have we invested in the rest of things. But we did it purely for selfish reasons, for ourselves. This is the old scratch and itch that everybody used to talk about. Okay, the second we say maybe we could build a community, we actually have extra work to do. And those community building activities of ensuring that we're kind of making it easy for users to try, because those users are going to lead to selfish developers. And I say selfish developers because that developer wants to do something for themselves. They either found a bug that we missed and they want to fix it, or they want to add some functionality, use it in a new way. But that still doesn't mean we're seeing anything back. We've just made it easy for that outward flow of intellectual property. And that last kind of on-ramp, users to selfish developers, is to turn them back into contributors. Allow that natural economics in engineering to kick in, that it's a whole lot easier for all of us to collectively manage the release if you give it back to us than for that person to continually live on a more brittle fork over history. And so but that's extra work. We've now had to put on a different new hat to build a community. And if we do all of that really well, we hit this natural wall of liability and risk where, if a company wants to sponsor you and I and our fledgling community doing everything right, but we're going to have a meetup and a company says, really love using your software. Can we give you a check to host the meetup? Who do they write the check to? Companies don't write checks to Steve or Ildiko, kind of thing. Likewise, a company says, you know, we really want to use this software. You seem to have liberally licensed it, but who owns it? Because we're about to use it in a customer-facing product, and they have a very different risk profile than you and I just solving a problem we cared about. And it's like, so companies care about ownership and provenance. And a simple nonprofit structure cleans all of that up. Nonprofit structure can own the asset. They can hold a bank account. You and I aren't, we have no personal liability risk anymore. There's kind of a place that the company can feel a little more confident that there's a center of gravity, not, Ildiko and Steve kind of thing. And, you know, but that's a separate set of skills again, right? Is okay, now we're running our little nonprofit. But that's kind of the general flow of these things. And at no point am I suggesting that we are all in this together. Even in that community aspect, it's no, we've built a little factory of collaboration, if you will, where we've happily shared stuff out. We've done the work to make it easy for a user to get to a known state, a developer to get to a known state. We've told contributors, if you want to contribute for good reasons, here's how to do it. And that's the engine. And we're also like, we have a small sustainable engine at that point. We can allow Phil to join us. Phil's been making interesting contributions. We'd love Phil to join our fledgling community here. And you can add another maintainer. And maybe Phil doesn't actually want scribble rights on the repos, but he's happy to actually manage the release every 4 months for the next year until he gets burned out and he wants somebody else to manage the release. And so we're into that space where, yes, we're all cooperating. We're all doing it for really selfish needs.